G'day guys, it's Michael and Christian here with the PowerShell 101 with Michael and Christian. And so g'day and welcome.
If this is your first time watching, that's Michael. I'm Christian.
Yep. I'm basically the founder and the I'm just gonna use, I don't like the word founder. I think that's a little over pretentious. Oh, that collar is not nice. I would say facilitator of the Brisbane PowerShell user group. So I kind of just organize things and get things around. But Christian's basically decided to take up the dark art of learning information technology. Christian's got a fairly extensive technical background in, was it, what did you train as?
Originally, I studied a Certificate 3 in Information,
Yeah,
Digital Media and
yeah, yeah,
Technology, which was mainly just a background in
yeah.
network
Mm,
troubleshooting. Really, really basic
mm.
stuff.
And did you, what, from the aviation side of things,
Yeah.
was it just an aircraft mechanic, was it?
No, it was actually avionics. So,
Yeah.
for those who don't know, that's aircraft electronics. That mainly covers things like your radio and navigation equipment, your instruments, and any electrical system
Mm.
that's on an aircraft.
So Christian's come from a very quite technical background in the electronic space. Obviously having a bit of computer skills, but has decided he's going to obviously give it a go in IT and see how we go. So I think so today's basically format's just going to be a little bit more informal. I'm going to be trying to write a lot less code today. And Christian will basically be doing a little bit more writing today. So we're going to be trying to switch the reins of the PowerShell onto him, so we can actually start learning a little bit more about what is required in terms of flow control, troubleshooting, things like that. Then obviously logic and other things like that. So I think that's pretty much it. Is there anything else you want to add, or like I think yeah.
No, think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, I think okay, cool. So, so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be starting work on our little project that we've kind of just had a bit of a back and forth on what we wanted to do in terms of
What project
yeah, what
essentially?
project we want to actually do. Yeah, so I think in this instance, to this time, we're going to be building a remote bot. So basically, what we're going to be having is what we call an API endpoint that's going to be able to trigger some sort of ingestion that's going to store into a database, and then we're going to have a C# service be able to take that ingestion data, execute it, and then send it back. So I think that's pretty much it in terms of what we're going to have in terms of goals today. We're not going to obviously this is going to be a multi-part kind of project. We're not going to be able to achieve this in one day. But what we're going to definitely be able to do is at least have a good understanding of the foundations that we need to actually to be able to make this happen. So as all good concepts, any sort of good concept or any sort of goal that needs to be defined, and we obviously need to define this goal in terms of what technical requirements and what items we need to have to be able to achieve what we wanted to do. So it also provides a bit more perspective in terms of being able to understand what is, I would say, it helps you kind of articulate in the when you're trying to do any sort of PowerShell scripting or any sort of programmatic or any sort of architecture. This is going to cover pretty much all these kind of facets. How to actually go about doing that. So I think the first thing, and it always comes down to, is just that brainstorming session. What exactly do we need? What technical products do we need? Things like that. So Christian's got his Surface here today, which is that's fantastic. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically just jump into a whiteboard session. I've got Microsoft Whiteboard here, so we're going to kind of just fire this up. We've kind of both added ourselves on this. If you haven't seen Microsoft Whiteboard before, I highly recommend you check it out. It's a really good product. And allows you to basically, use a single surface to be able to actually, quickly, um, brainstorm items. So I'll kind of get started first. Basically, what we're kind of looking for in terms of is a multi-part service. So there's a kind of few things that we need here in terms of what we call services. Now, we're going to be building this all with Microsoft Azure. So if you guys are not familiar with Microsoft Azure, Azure is basically a cloud services platform that's provided by Microsoft that provides be able to host various services and runs various technologies. So you can run virtual machines to obviously network stacks, VPN tunnels, on that whole network side of things. You can build SQL servers, load balancers, a lot of websites, things like that. Event-driven development, which is what we're going to be doing with it, and then other items. So I think the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to kind of obviously coin our what we call our logo. So I'll get you to draw, Christian, we're going to draw a, oh, I'll draw it and then you can kind of just reproduce it because you're going to be able to draw it better than I can.
Well, kind of. I'm running a remote desktop session to a computer at home so I can use another tool.
Yeah.
However, the connection's a bit
Terrible.
slow.
Pretty terrible. So basically, so when you see this in terms of, with the exception, obviously how do I get rid of this?
You got a little erase tool.
Where's my erase tool? Oh, there it is, yeah. So when you see anything like this, what we're saying is this is a database. So I think the first thing we're going to need in these instances is a database. We're going to basically, so that's what we call is our database. The next thing we're going to need is what we call Azure Functions. Azure Functions are basically defined by a lightning bolt. Azure Functions, if you guys are not aware of, basically what they are, they're basically run on resource programming. So basically, you only pay for execution, and they're really good because they have what we call API endpoints. So you can define what we call an API endpoint. So basically, Azure Functions rely on event-driven development. So they hook into really cool features called service bus technology stacks, where you can do what we call message push and pulls, things like that. So these are really cool. We're going to be using Azure Functions because we can leverage the API side of things with PowerShell. So we're going to be writing PowerShell as Azure Functions. So this is going to be really cool. And we're going to be writing it in PowerShell Core, which is even, yeah, I'm actually really stoked to do that. I haven't actually got to write many projects recently in PowerShell Core. So this is kind of a
learning curve for both of us.
Oh, I wouldn't say it's a learning curve for me at all.
Well,
Because
no,
PowerShell, yeah, but
your,
PowerShell Core is something that I'm quite obviously I haven't had to be able to run like in my production at work because our clients just don't use it. So it's yes, we can install PowerShell Core and then obviously go down that line there, but the amount of effort that we need to go to be able to test out modules, and most of those modules that we're going to be using, such as what we call LithMet RMA, I don't believe they're going to work properly in PowerShell Core. So this is going to be written purely ground up from PowerShell Core, so it will be supported, and I'm like super proud. I'm super keen.
That means I'll have to get the Windows management framework for PowerShell Core, won't I?
Yeah, I think you just need to install PowerShell Core. So you just go to the GitHub on PowerShell. I think it's PowerShell on GitHub. I think it's like PowerShell Core.github, something like that. Download the latest release, and yeah, really cool stuff for you guys. Future editions of Windows 10, I believe PowerShell 7, which is just been released, is now going to be shipping by default on Windows releases. So PowerShell Core and PowerShell 5.1, oh sorry, 5.2 will be running side by side. But PowerShell Core is obviously there natively there, which is really good because one of the things with that is obviously PowerShell Core for 7 or PowerShell 7 as per se. It's running on Core 3.0, which has a lot more better features. But the biggest thing is that it's serviceable through Windows updates. So Microsoft will service it, so you're not imagining, having to manually go to GitHub and you get the latest releases, or having to go, to the gallery. So basically, it's natively being built in, which is a really huge. That's really good. I love that. Anyway, that all aside, obviously we've got our Azure Functions, we've got databases. The final one we're going to do is a nice cog. As you can see, this is not a cog. I'm just drawing this with a mouse. Christian's got this.
I doubt my cog will be any better, but let's give it a shot.
Yeah, this is a service. So as you guys know, when we're going to talk cogs, we're going to talk Windows services. So Windows services, if you guys are not aware, basically what they are is they're a special type of a program that can run, that's supposed to be run as a which is supported by Windows Service framework. And what happens is when you run this, it basically has what we call start and stop queues and things like that. So what can happen is when you actually issue it a start command, it will start, and when you issue a stop command, it just means that it's a little bit more friendly in terms of being able to manage. And if you're wanting to run, for example, a process that's reoccurring for a long period of time, this is the way you do it. So in this instance, we're going to need to build a bot. We're going to build the bot as a Windows service, and we're going to actually do some remote execution with PowerShell. So I think what we're going to need to have a bit of an understanding here is how all this is going to work in terms of, we've got these three types of, we've got these three elements, these three technologies that we're using, and these three technologies, how we're going to make them talk to each other. So actually, there was one item I did miss, and that's what we call the cloud. So I'm going to use cloud. We're going to reference Azure Cloud. So let's kind of have a bit of a sorry, I'm just kind of humming and hawing in my mind. A bit of a brainstorm. We need to talk to the API endpoint. Obviously the service is going to talk to the API endpoint, so there actually needs to be, I think there'll need to be two API endpoints that need to be talked to, that need to be pulled from. So the first one will be a request, so that will be from a machine that's actually sending in a command. So that'll be a push. So you basically, excuse me. Oh, I did sleep well last night. That'll be a push. So what will be in that instance from an API endpoint, if we're doing a HTTP push, in essence, we're going to be doing a HTTP post. So we're going to be posting data to that API endpoint. So that API endpoint needs to be a post. And then we need to have obviously a backside of that. So it needs to be able to retrieve something. So that can be a get. So if you guys are not familiar with HTTP processes, what I might do is I might do a bit of a talk sometime soon about REST APIs. I did do a BrizPug talk, so I can pretty much just recycle the PowerPoint and then go from there. But basically what it is there's pretty much the big four in terms of what you need to kind of know to be able to send to API endpoints. So you've got for REST services, HTTP REST services, HTTP Hypertext Transfer Protocol. That's everything that operates on the internet. So you have what we call, obviously you got your GET. So when you go to google.com, you go www.google.com, that's a GET request. You're basically sending a HTTP packet to the endpoint and saying, get me some goodness, give me some data. I want your website, and it will send back the website as the body of the text. So the body that comes back is the website that it displays. The next one is what we call the next one is the post. Post is when you're sending stuff to the API endpoint. So think of posting as a set in PowerShell. So when you're setting data or you're logging in. So if you're logging into like Facebook, you're sending data. And that data would be your username and password. The next one would be what's the next one would be? Delete. Delete is basically an equivalent to PowerPoint is remove. If you want to remove a file, you're deleting, that kind of thing. What's going on back there? Look, my computer just woke up. Yes, that's Windows on a Mac. Don't hate.
It looks better that way.
The next one is which is another a bit more of a which is get post put. Sorry, yeah, put. Yeah, put. Put is basically the equivalent to No, sorry. Post is new. Put is update or set. So if you're doing a put, you're basically setting. So like set ADUs. If you're doing a post, you're doing a new ADUs. It's
Yeah.
usually used to create something. So we're going to create. So what we're going to do here is we've got our elements. So can I borrow that for a second? We're going to kind of just.
You'll have to do it slowly.
Yeah, that's fine. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of squiggle around. We're going to talk about how we're going to build these endpoints. So I'm just going to drag this off.
You need to have the little tick.
Oh, okay, sorry. Oops, I'm just going to... no, just like that.
First time we've used Microsoft Whiteboard, guys. Bear with us.
Yeah, they're just... Where's the erase
It's
tool?
that one.
Oh, there it is. I know it's there. Like, I'm just like... Usually when we're at work, because we've got Surface... We've got the Surface hubs, I just like straight with the back of the pen. I'm like, chip, 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 and it just starts.
Well, there is the back of the
pen. Oh, it does have a back of pen, yeah. Okay, so... First thing we need to do is we obviously need to understand the architecture. So we got our... Oh, yeah, I've got to select the pen. So we got our remote computer here. That's a computer. Don't hate me.
Not a tub, a computer.
There we go. So that's a computer there. Just gonna see if that erases a bit. No, that's still drawing. That's fine. So we got our computer there. We have Azure. That circle was supposed to be a cloud, but let's just.
Like I said, you got to do it slowly.
Yep. So what we need to do is, this is our API endpoint. So this is what I'm talking about brainstorming here. So it's too bad you can't add text boxes in here, but anyway. So the next thing we're going to do, I'm just going to quickly move this across. And then just move this one across. So the next thing we need to do is, we need to have, so this is our, on the left hand side there, that's our API endpoint. So that's where we're going to have our service run. I'm just going to draw a star for a service because I saw Christian drawing a trying to draw a cog, and that
it was dismal for one.
Yeah, this is really slow. So that basically is our cog. That's running our service. So basically, that's what's going to be executing the command or whatever we want to send. The next part is, we've got our receiver and then we've got our sender. So our sender, yeah, this is kind of got to really focus on drawing. So our sender is sending something, and as we said before, we're going to be doing a post. It just really went bright. So we're going to be doing a post to that. Now that post, this is really, really painful. That's post. I think I'm just gonna draw on the computer. This is like gonna kill me. I think, yeah, so this is gonna be a post like so. So we're doing a post API request. This is gonna be a get. The reason why this is a get is because the endpoint is just getting something. It's oh, actually, that's an interesting concept. We're doing remote code execution, but let's say you want to run some code, all right?
Yeah.
Let's say you want to get child item.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you want the results back?
Well, yeah.
That means that makes it an extra API endpoint, because we're doing a fetch. We're saying, I want to get the data. I want to get. Yeah, so I'm hitting the API endpoint. And I'm saying, what do you want me to execute? I'm executing it, and then I need to push it back. Does that make sense?
It does.
So we need to actually, this is actually a both get and post on both sides, because it applies to the other side. If you do a post, you want to know what the response is, based on the
Let me see if I can speed this up a bit. Keep going.
This is really terrible, really, really terrible. I wonder if I can just copy and paste like words. Oh, I can just type text. Here we go. Get. Let me just do this. This works way better. Let's do like that. Yep, sweet. So if we add a text there, we're just gonna get post. So so this is basically what we're going to need to do. We're going to need to get execution code, and then we're going to post back the results. And then on the other side here, we're going to get the results and post the execution code. All right, so that's basically we've got our two endpoints, but now we kind of got to work out. We've kind of now built out roughly what we need to do to be able to start this process. So the next thing we need to do is we actually need to work out what we need to put inside this Azure environment here. So I did mention we need a database because we obviously need to store. We need to store code. Like we need to store code. Now we're not talking about database schemas or anything like that yet, but we kind of do need to kind of have a bit of a chat about that. The next thing we need to talk about is what we need API endpoints. So we're going to use Azure Functions, and we need 4 API endpoints. Now, what do you reckon, Christian, these API endpoints should be? Because I'm kind of like we've got get post for both of them.
Yep.
Now, keep in mind the method, which is get post, that can talk to the same endpoint. So if it's like slash, like if it's www.brucepug.com/Bob the Builder, it can do a get and a post to that same URL endpoint. That's fine. So I'm kind of like humming and hawing about what do we want the remote remote endpoint to hit as a route. And what I mean by a route is after you go like brucepug.com/ the next if it's like slash you know how you got like slash login or slash like that we need something there. That's what we're going to define our route to be. So I'm just going to call this a remote route. So a remote route should be, what do you reckon it should be? Because I'm thinking actually no, I'll let you make the decision because after all it's your baby. So we're kind of going to work out what we need to do there.
Well, like you said, route works. After all,
it needs to be descriptive to what the endpoint wants to do. So think about it as you can use route, that's fine, but it's not descriptive.
No.
We need to be able to make it at least somewhat descriptive so we can understand what it's trying to hit. Yeah.
Okay. Now bear with me, guys. It's not often I get to do this stuff.
Remember, this is your remote endpoint. This is what we're trying to work with. Like, there's plenty of them out there. So you just kind of like, it's just got to summarize exactly what it's what those specific 2 API endpoints are going to do. Because remember, we've got 2 on this side, which is get execution code and post the results.
Yeah.
And then we've got get results, post execution code. But there's 2 things that denote both sides very straight, like very like they separate in terms of schema, if you'd call it that, which is you've got your local and then you've got your remote.
Yeah.
So what do you reckon the
well then that one would be remote and that one would be local.
You reckon?
Yeah.
So we'll go that. So that's going to be our endpoints. I think like what I would have done, I would have probably said actually no, that works fine. I think that works really well. Okay, so the next thing, I'm just going to bring it up the screen so we can kind of start looking a bit more at this. So the next thing we need to kind of start thinking about is what do we want to do in terms of we've got these 4 API endpoints, we've got a database. Now we need to start thinking about our database schema. Now, Christian hasn't done database schema design yet, so I'm going to kind of just breeze through this. I'm not going to spend much time on it. So basically what we're going to do here in this instance is we're going to we need a couple of tables in our database. So I'm just going to go tables. So our first table is going to need to be, we're going to need a push and a pull in essence. So we're going to need to be able, or do we? We could just actually have one table realistically. Let's just go with one. Let's just call it remote underscore code underscore execution. Look at that. All right, so within that, we're going to need some columns. So I'm kind of thinking we need an ID column. So we need an ID. We're going to need a ID, obviously increments. We're going to need obviously what we're going to execute. So we're just going to call it PowerShell. We're going to just remotely execute PowerShell on the machine. We're going to do ID PowerShell status. I think that's pretty much it. I'm just kind of thinking about it. So this is a one-to-one. We could actually, what we could do, we could actually say computer name. And this, using the computer name column, we can actually target.
Well, then you can also use say the local to get the remote as well, so you can go both ways. Because your computer name section will change, right?
Interesting. I'm thinking. Oh, could. The only reason why I was going to use computer name is, let's say you have 20 services installed. You want to target that one.
Yeah.
That works. Now we can actually do something there. So we can basically have like computer name. So the way that the service will look is it will go, give me everything for my computer name. But then what we can do is anything that's flagged with an all. So what will happen is the API endpoint, it'll look for the computer name and anything that we tag with all. And if it's tagged with all, basically means you can hit every computer simultaneously. So you can be like, all right, like what you could do there from like from a coding perspective, I could basically say like my code that I want to execute is like get computer name doesn't exist, but let's say it does, or an env computer name, and you could get a list of every computer. And the thing is that would okay, cool. So we've got a database schema, we've got a bit of tables, we've got an ID, PowerShell, status, computer name, execution code. So what do you think in terms of what other features do you think we should have in this? Because we've kind of got we've pretty much got the fundamentals. We can build this out as much as we want, to be honest. Like we can build like whatever we want, really. Like this pretty much to provide a bit of a concept. This remote code execution we could actually build into a module. So for example, the service would still operate on the endpoint over here, and this the whole cycle would work. But on top of this side of things, so over here, on this side of things, we could actually have a module built around that. So a module could be, let's see if I can get a lighter pen. Yeah, I can. So we could have a module basically surrounding that. And you could have off to the side here, get computer, things like that. In fact, you could actually even write, we could write additional, you could actually write what we call proxy functions for the existing code that allows, for example, get services and things like that to work over the internet. This is what I mean. Like, you basically, what we're building right here is its ability to be able to natively integrate PowerShell itself. So um, let's say you have like get services, for example, in PowerShell. You can specify the computer name attribute, and that would go on your local network to that computer and get the service. But let's say the computer doesn't exist. Well, what we can do is we can write a proxy function. And what a proxy function does is it basically acts like a wrapper. It sits over the top of get service. And what it does is it goes, we could add some extra attributes to it. So we could add like an attribute called online services or online servers. And basically what it would do is it would go out and actually issue a request using this framework. Because basically what we've just done is we've just built a framework. And then that basically would then go execute on that. It would go send a command to that by addressing to that computer name,
Yeah.
which would then execute the code and then bring it back. So obviously, what all we do is we'll just be wrapping the service inside we wrap that service inside a wrapper, serialize it. We'll talk about what serializing and deserializing is later, but then basically send that over and then send it back. So basically, what we've done is we've built a full remote execution platform that's built inside of Windows PowerShell natively, which is actually really cool on .NET Core. I think that's pretty cool. I think that's actually really cool. So this is kind of the thing is though, this is what shows you what you can do with PowerShell. So while we've got something quite small here, where we're basically just taken, this, and this, and like we can build an extension of PowerShell that no one's ever really hasn't really touched before. The way that would have to basically do some extra, obviously there would need to be security and things like that built into that. But for this, we're just building a proof of concept. Like I'm not having to, I don't particularly want to build a full remote execution platform because the amount of we'd have to add OAuth token security, so you'd have to authenticate things like that. Obviously it's running on your own tenant, things like that. So there'll be a lot of security implications and things like you'd have to cater into it. But I think it's alright.
Well, we don't need them yet.
Yeah, we don't need it yet. But I think from your concept, you'd be able to wrap you basically be like, I want to touch that machine over there, and you could touch it without having to in essence, you could touch that machine regardless of whether you're on the network or not. Whether they're on the machine or not. And the reason why, and this is actually really cool, is so from a networking perspective, you have you've got your firewall. And your firewall's usually configured. Most firewalls, your home firewalls, corporate firewalls are similar. Oh, the light died. Huh. Okay. Well, it dimmed. It's probably dying. You've got your corporate firewalls. Let's charge it up because my wife's gonna get cranky at me if I don't. She has a flat one. So you got your corporate firewall. Also your home firewall, and that basically blocks traffic coming in from the internet. So for example, if you want an RDP home, you've got a port forward for the 3389, which is the standard RDP port, to access your computer. So you got to open a port in your firewall to be able to hit your external IP to then go to internal, and that'll basically do your NAT traversal as well. But corporate firewalls work a little bit differently. They work on the outbound. But the one thing that basically always works on outbound is mostly HTTPS. That usually does get proxied, but I generally don't see proxies blocking access to Azure tenants because of the way that web filters are configured. So from a remote execution point of view, it means that even if the computer's behind a network, it's still accessible.
Well, yeah, especially if it works on outbound.
Yeah, exactly. It only just works on outbound. So from a networking perspective, it works well, and it's all HTTPS, so it's all 443. This is basically in essence how Azure Automation works and hybrid runbook workers, but we're just obviously just going to kind of reinvent the wheel here. So I think I think we're going to probably think about now the API endpoints. I think that's the big focus. this side of things, the right-hand side, I don't think really is that important. The API endpoints are quite important. Service we're going to worry about last. And then basically, yeah. So what from a PowerShell architecture point of view, I'm just going to draw this over now. So we're going to start thinking about PowerShell. We're going to need to start thinking about what functions we need to write to be able to achieve.
You're kidding me.
What? You just completely like drew a massive line.
Yeah, I know. I went for a zoom function.
And it just went.
Yep.
Love it.
Disadvantage of whiteboard people.
Yeah. So from a PowerShell perspective, we need to be able to talk to various systems. I think the first one we need to do we need to talk to database. So we need to be able to actually talk to a database using PowerShell. Now, some people like to use PowerShell functions. I'm just going to call this PowerShell functions that we need. So we're going to need to talk to SQL. Some people use the SQL module. I don't use it personally because I don't want to go to the module, the store library, and go download the module when I pretty much got the function written already. That's something I've wrote already, so there's no issue there. So the next one we're going to need to talk, realistically, I think it's just a database. What else do you think? Because ultimately we need to be able to talk. Oh yeah, serializing and deserializing. I need to talk about this. So we need to be able to serialize and deserialize our code. So we need to basically, what we're going to be doing is when we're writing out, we're remote executing PowerShell. So we need to be able to take that existing PowerShell, serialize it, and then send it over the internet. Now, easier said than done. We just can't send straight PowerShell over the internet. It's just not possible. So what we're going to need to do here is we're going to need to do a we're going to need to either convert it to XML or we're going to convert it to JSON. They're two serializing platforms that are native or in PowerShell. We could use YAML, but I'm not going to really talk about that. So JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. If you guys are not familiar with JSON, basically what it is, it's just this text format that allows you to send programmatic objects, or plain text format that allows you to send programmatic objects in plain text.
Yeah.
It's the same with XML, extensible markup language. It's the same process. They have their advantages and disadvantages. XML's better because basically it supports a lot more features. JSON's easier to read. I find JSON's easier to read. XML's much more harder, but it's each to their own. I think in this instance, I'm going to go down XML because rather than basically converting objects to JSON, if I convert them to CLI XML, which is what PowerShell under the hood with WinRM operates with, Windows Remoting. No, not Windows Remoting.
Windows Remote Management?
No, it's not WinRM because of taking a step back. It's PowerShell Remoting. Sorry, I'm going to try and use the correct terminology. With PowerShell Remoting, everything basically is encapsulated using CLI XML. So when you send a remote PowerShell command, it's encapsulated using CLI XML. The reason why it's using that is it can store type information, which is way better. Now, in this instance, it's not really that problematic because basically we're just going to pretty much, what we're going to do in this instance, we're just going to encode the entire PowerShell script as a base64 string. If you're not familiar with base64, base64 is what we use to encode code over the internet. And the reason why is because when we encode something in base64, it's basically I think it's a 5-bit or it's an 8-bit. I can't remember. And what it is, it's just a mathematical algorithm that basically replaces programmatic code with alpha text. characters. And the reason why that's really important is because basically when you're doing large URL get requests or sets or or post patches, puts, deletes, things like that, everything's usually encoded, and it's encoded in base 64. Now there's a few variants in base 64 in terms of there's a UTF-8, there's ASCII, there's ASCII 32. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can encode it and various encoding methods. I think we're just going to use UTF. It doesn't really matter, like as long as they're consistent on both ends. So what we're going to need to put on this side here, roughly, is we're going to do we need base 64, encode, and decode. What else? I'm just kind of thinking, what else do you reckon we need to add? Because I'm kind of like, I don't think that's really out. I think that's pretty much it.
This is all new to me, so.
So from a programmatic point of view, from an architecture point of view, what I'm doing is I'm thinking about the technical components. How is this action? What does it need to be able to do this specific action? So we need to be able to encode it. We need an API endpoint. We need a database. We need obviously to put it in a database. We need an SQL database. We need some bits and pieces there. We need a base 64 encode. Ooh, it's gonna be interesting because we're gonna be okay. So I just had a bit of a thought. I'm like, oh, interesting. This is gonna be really interesting. PowerShell. I don't know if PowerShell core. We're gonna have to have a bit of a read of the SQL client in .NET Core because
Oh dear.
my SQL clients are written .NET 4.6. So this is gonna be fun. This is all gonna be learning. So I think what we're going to do right now, I think this is the big thing, is we need to actually work out. We've got our two major things in PowerShell. We need to work out what we need to do. The first one is the SQL database. The second one is the base 64 encoding and decoding. So I think for the rest of today's lesson, which is just about 45 minutes, 3:30, yeah, 3:30. We're basically going to be doing. We're going to do base 64 encoding and decoding in .NET Core. Actually, no, we're not, because I think you're not going to be able to write that. I think it's a little bit too advanced.
Yeah.
I think that might be a bit too advanced.
We'll come back. I stole your fun, guys.
Yeah, I think we'll come back to that one. So what we'll do is we're going to write the initial PowerShell Azure functions. So we're going to create them in Azure. We're going to basically, and we're going to write some basic code. We're not going to worry about the encoding and decoding at the moment. We're just going to do the basic one. So the first one we're going to write is, let's create our Azure function to do a intercept. Also, we're going to intercept. We're going to basically receive data, and we're going to then store it in a database. So that is going to be our initial sender. Sends data. We're going to capture it. That's the API endpoint. So first thing we're going to do is I'm going to jump into my extensions and see if there is an Azure. I think there is an Azure one. An Azure Functions one. I hope there is. Oh, look at that. I love it. I love it so much. I'm going to Azure Functions.
There it is.
Alright, now how do I make it work? Visit the wiki. Okay.
You got to love it.
Oh, for extensible information. Okay, enable slots. Cap. Yep. Oh, look at there it is. Sign into Azure. Okay, I might just need to go AFK for a sec, guys, because I kind of need to. Actually, I think it's signing in automatically. Are you? Oh, no, I'm not. That's fine. I can just do this. It's off screen. We're fine. Next. Put my phone in. Press home to unlock. What am I doing? I'm going to the authenticator. Send notification. Yeah. Done. Alright. Right, let me just quickly sort this out. See if I can see the... Alrighty, here we go. So, oh man, I'm already in love with Visual Studio Code, and now I love it even more. That is fantastic. Alright, so let's go create our function. So I'm just going to go inside here. I'm going to create a function. I'm just kind of winging this. I don't know how this works, but I'm assuming based on like how Azure works, this is pretty much what we're going to need to do. So I'm just going to right click, and that doesn't work. Oh, there it is right there. Create function. The selected folder is not a function project. Create a new project. Yes. Type of language. Oh, I thought it did PowerShell. Functions does PowerShell. What? Oh, don't tell me it's not supporting PowerShell. No. No.
A little bit
No.
less love.
Yeah, a little bit less love now. I think I have to go back to my tenant. Okay, I'm just going back to my tenant. Okay, so go to our functions. Functions, there's multiple types of functions you can create. So if you haven't used Azure Functions, I highly recommend you can check them out. Yes, I need to configure application insights. That's something I need to do. I'll do that in a moment. So I'm going to create a function. I'm going to create a new function. I think just Visual Studio Code doesn't support beta mode. So you can see we've got a couple of different types of functions we've got here. We've got the HTTP trigger, we've got timer trigger, we've got Azure storage triggers. So this is the whole event-driven development in here. So this is the reason why it's really good. Oh, we've got a HTTP. Oh, that's cool. Okay, they've added so much cool stuff here. That's really cool. And there's some awesome demos here. That's really cool. Okay, sweet. Sorry, I'm just looking at some of the stuff and I'm like, this is really cool. So we're just going to do a HTTP trigger and we're going to call it, we're just going to give it an authorization level of function. That's fine. We're just going to call it HTTP. What was it? What would you go? It was, what was our whiteboard?
And
It was local. We're going to do local. So we're going to go HTTP local, and we're just going to call it send. So we're actually going to accept a send request. So we're going to hit create. This is going to think about it, and it's then going to create us a function. Now, usually when we create this, you're supposed to be able to do this in PowerShell, unless they've changed it. Please don't tell me they've changed it, because you could send the language. Where's the languages?
if you can input the language up there.
Oh, you can too. Service community library. Okay, we're learning here. They've changed the interface again, so I still love Azure Functions. Like, we're not going to write this in PowerShell. We're going to write this in PowerShell because this is PowerShell 101. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this function. There was a PowerShell. They've removed it. I have to quickly go to Google and find out if they've removed it, because I think they have. Or I haven't set it up correctly, which is probably...
Well, you are searching in C#.
It's unsupported experimental. Yeah, I knew it was experimental. Create your own function. That's what I thought. Do I have to turn it on? It's been so long now. I think I might have to turn it on. That's PHP, okay. No, that's 1.1's fine. Right, debugging. That's really cool. You can basically like hook into with Visual Studio remotely and debug your application.
Yeah, I did see that because I went and I grabbed the tools. Comes with everything.
It's really good. They've changed this again. If you guys are watching, you can help me out. That'd be really awesome because I haven't done this for a while. But usually that's fine. Scale up, scale out, dynamic streaming, BizPub. Just gonna have another look in here because usually create a function. Oh, hang on. Get started. Yep. I'm just gonna go any editor. This is now confusing me because I don't really want to write this in C#.
Are you using the 2.0 runtime? Or the 2.x, I should say? It's got to be 1.
Version 2.0 doesn't support experimental sorting. Okay, where is it? Yeah, I thought that was, yeah, okay. Okay, that's making sense. This has been a while. Okay, I'm in my BrisPub. Where is it? Platform features. Settings. No, what the? I'm just going to function app setting. So
runtime version needs to be 1.
It needs to be 1? Okay,
yep.
That's fine. I think that might be the issue. Which is good because it means that hopefully we can get this going again. Oh man. I think by default I just use 2. It's just that I have because I write in C# all the time, I just haven't had to deal with it. So I go back. Aha! Now we're in business. Look at that. Completely better. Create our own custom function.
There we go. The only thing is that
no, no.
In this,
I thought it supported PowerShell. Where's all the other good PowerShell stuff? Ah, enabled. There it is.
Yeah.
There it is.
It only supports PowerShell 5.1.
That's really?
Yep.
Oh, that sucks. I thought it was .NET Core. Oh well.
Looks like we're writing it in 5.1.
We're writing in 5.1 again. Just escape that. Okay, let's try to create a function inside of here now and see if it will let us. So if I go new function, yeah, create a new project. No, I don't think it supports it. That's fine. What we can do is we can just create an Azure and it should just sync it. So we've got a HTTP trigger. We're going to use PowerShell. What did we call it? We just called it
HTTP local send.
It's going to have a function of that. And the beauty about when we create PowerShell in Azure Functions, as you can see when we decided to fire it up. I'm actually going to try and refresh this here as well and see if this works. I'm praying that we can get the function here. I'm praying. Come on, functions. Come on, functions. Come on. Oh, look at that. Bam. Sweet. So if I start streaming logs, can I actually... Okay, I think... Start streaming logs. Okay, that's really cool. Run.ps1. So as you can see it here, we've got our default PowerShell. I'm trying to see if I can hook into it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to deploy to it. The way we're going to do that is we're going to hook it into our GitHub later, but we're just going to focus on writing some initial code now. So let's just jump in here. Let's jump back into here. We're just going to grab that. And we are now going to go to our editor and we're going to write some PowerShell. So the first thing we're going to do is under our API endpoints, I'm going to create a new file and we're just going to call this HTTP send. Was it HTTP send? Local send.
Local send.
PS1. I'm just going to call it that because then basically we know what the function is. So there's the code for the Azure function. Now Christian should be able to see that, and we're actually going to start writing some code. So
Where did it hide? That's
Yeah,
the question.
so the first thing you can see there is that basically we're getting the content of the request. It's and then converting it from JSON. I'm going to have a quick squiz at this because I want to work out what kind of function it's putting in there. So I believe based on its initials, it seems to be a post. We did say that. Yeah. Okay. Never mind me. Don't worry about me.
We weren't.
Yeah, no one is. All right. So basically so to quickly take you through exactly what's happening, is you can see we've got this variable called REQ. REQ is a predefined variable that PowerShell predefined. It's been set by PowerShell beforehand, and it's basically captured the body of the HTTP request. So to put that into kind of layman's terms, that's just captured our awesome code. So in essence, we don't even need to convert it from JSON. What we're going to need to do...
So you're saying that this line up here...
I don't think we do it. We don't need it because we've actually... What we're going to be doing is we're going to be basically building it as a base 64 string. So let's kind of let's quickly take a step back because we're going to need to write some functions to convert to and from base 64. In this instance, well, hang on, do we? I'm kind of like, can we just pass this straight through and then let the endpoint deal with it? Because I'm like, that'd be a better way to do it. Like, what I mean is, like, so if you think about it, code gets wrapped, gets sent, this just takes it, stores it,
pushes it onto the endpoint.
yeah, and it does nothing with it in terms of trying to manage it. It just sends it. That'd be an easier way to deal with it. So yeah, we can get rid of convert from JSON. We can just accept the raw body, and we're just going to hand it straight over to the service. So what we're going to do there is let's get rid of convert from JSON. We just don't need it.
Which means we don't need the pipeline.
Yeah, we don't need that specific part of the pipeline. We've got the next part was we've got request body.name. Now, we don't need any of we don't need from lines 3 to 9 because that's just completely irrelevant. Like, that's assuming that basically we've sent something in the body, but we're just passing it through. So what we're going to do here is firstly, we're going to need we're PowerShell 5, right?
Yeah.
All right, good. Let's create a class. And let's call it execution status. The reason why, what we're going to do here is we need to feed statuses back to the endpoint. So what I'm thinking of doing is just building a class that we can just quickly put in the other scripts that just goes, so we don't have to deal with this. So what we're going to do there is I'll get you to build a default constructor. The properties will be status.
It would help if I could
Oh, would we? Kind of like, what would you do? Because I'm like, no, I don't think, no, we don't. Get rid of it. I think it's just a waste. I think get rid of the class. Yeah, I think it's just overcomplicating it. So what we're going to do is let's build a bit of a schema. So let's so in the comments up the top here, we need to basically have some statuses. I'm going to get you to write the statuses out because that's you're driving today. I'm not. So I want you to comment, like, and this is also good for teaching you to comment. The first thing you want to do is be very verbose in exactly what the program's trying, or what the script's trying to do, what its outcome is, how we like, what does the reader need to know about that script.
Yeah.
We also need to have a write output because we're going to write unit tests for this as well. So we're going to write pesters for this. So we need to,
which by rights we should be doing first, but I don't know how to write pester yet.
So in terms of the output for this, basically our only unit test output would be, was it a success or not? That would be really it. I'm kind of thinking like, oh no, 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 no. The result will be basically the entry. So if you've said, I've said, start this piece of code and run it on that machine over there, its result should be, okay, this is my ID of the request. This is a GUID for filtering purposes. This is the status of it. So using those three, when we poll, so when we basically on the client, we go, hey, what do you have? What do you have for me? What do you have for me? We can use, for example, the GUID, and then that basically knows where to go look. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, so think of it that they're two separate processes. So you've got this process here. You've just said, I want to create a job. Okay.
Yep.
The job gets sent to Azure, but remember, how does this job know when that job's done? Like, it needs to have information to be able to say to the endpoint, oh, for that machine and for that job I sent to that machine, what information do you have for me? And to be able to do that, once you've submitted the job, there should be a response back from Azure to say, this is the job, this is the GUID, this is the current status of it.
Yeah.
So once you have those, you just have the ID. But once you have those specific properties, basically you're pretty much set. And so what would happen from there is that basically when I do go and say, hey, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? If it's a module, so remember how we're talking about if it's that endpoint's wrapped in a module.
Yep.
It can then query and go, are you done? 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 So we're talking what we call event-driven development. So we're not, so we're waiting for the service at this other end over here to be able to submit, do what it's need to do, and then submit its data back. Once it's submitted its data back, it then comes across and back down. So when it says, are you done? And it goes, oh, I am done. Here's some extra stuff. Here's its results. Then you go, thank you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the way that we'll do it. Because at the end of the day, though, in event-driven development, or in service, like we're kind of taking it down to what we call an orchestration point of view, where we're basically sending it, but it's not live. So there could be an indeterminate amount of time before that service can query it. There could be like 20 seconds. Now, usually it would be instantaneous, but we're going down that model because it means that we don't need to maintain a direct link, but it also means that we can send far and wide commands to all our machines. So let's say, think of it this way. Let's say you want to run it across all your machines. Okay. So let's say you say, okay, I want to run get service across, I've got 20 machines that have got this service, and so I want to run it across all of them. So the initial request goes up, and then what happens is it goes, okay, run across all 20. So it sends it to all 20, and that basically goes, yep, all 20, and here's a result back. We need a results table. That's just come to mind. We need a results table. You probably add a comment for that. We're going to need a results table. I want to explain that in a second, because we're going to talk about many-to-one and one-to-one relationships. Oh, excuse me. So what we'd have to do in this instance would be so when it say I want to go to all 20, and then basically the results get sent back, the endpoint, when it says, hey, do you have anything for me? Do you have anything for me? It would actually go, do I have all 20 results yet? Do I have, no, I don't. No, you don't get anything. And once you do get all 20 results back,
then it pushes it over and...
Yeah. Or you could have something in that API endpoint saying, and that's the endpoint saying, or do you have any results for me endpoint, let's call it that. If it says to me, hey, do you have anything? Do you have anything? And it's been ages, and then nothing's come back. And you just say, we could put in there saying, just give me what you got, and it'll be like, okay, there's data, I'll just send him that. So that's another option there in terms of being able to hit those 20 machines, because we're kind of thinking what we got to start thinking, and this is where I was kind of like, we need a second table, is that we actually no, we don't really, but in terms of like database design, it's good to have a second table. And what I mean, the reason why is because we talk about one-to-many relationship. We have one request to 20 different computers. That's a one-to-many, or
Yeah.
a one-to-many.
Multicast, as it were.
Um, in networking, like in a local networking sense, yes. In a multicast sense, in an internet sense, multicast doesn't apply.
Yeah.
It only applies to the local network that you're on. So the way we deal with that multicast is we need a command table that basically accepts commands, but then we need a results table. And what this is the thing is that basically, we need to, for the results, when the data gets sent back to the database, the result data basically has to have, or like for example, the GUID would match inside of the request would match inside of the result. So when this endpoint goes to query it, it goes, when the initial request was sent, it might have in there, like there was 20 computers, for example. You might put in there there's 20 computers, so it does a quick lookup and works out how many computers there are. This is like going quite advanced, but we're not going to go that far. We're just going to deal with the basics. It'll come back and say, okay, there's 19 results. So we need to be able to have that in place, because if we don't have that in place, the first result that comes back will get immediately returned, and then the rest will never make it.
Yeah.
So this, do you see what I'm talking about in terms of trying to architecture the logic, and then this is kind of working out the PowerShell. In this part, all we need to do is basically send it up. Like, who cares? We're not doing any heavy lifting here. So what we're going to do here is let's get rid of our file, and we're going to write some basic code. We're just going to pseudocode this out. Let's see how we go. So the first part is we need in essence, we're going to need a just wondering whether we just do a straight query. Because really that's it. And then a response. Okay. This is what we're going to do. We actually need to build out our response. That's the first thing we need to do. So we need to understand our results, and then we can actually start writing our test. So our first result, I need you to build out a hash table.
Yeah, that's something I've clean forgotten. I shouldn't have, but...
So, remember objects?
Yeah, key value.
Yeah, key value. So remember, start off with any variable, you're prefixing it with a dollar. So we need to build out our return object. So we'll do that first. So we're just going to go dollar, because remember that we're building our variable. And then we're going to basically say, let's just say this is our return object. So let's just call it return. And we'll just call it return obj, camel case. Lowercase bj. Okay. Hash tables. So we go equals. Then we go at symbol. Open curly brace, close curly brace. There we go. Look at that. Sweet. So let's enter that down. Let's basically make it a multi-line so we can kind of get a bit of a see what's going on. So we kind of need to work out what do we actually want to return. So I think we need a result in the sense that we need a GUID. So let's just say we're going to need an ID. That's probably no, let's just say GUID and status. That's pretty good. Remember, inside a hash table, you don't actually need to prefix the dollar.
Yeah. So
just going GUID, and then we're just going to get equals.
tell me if I'm doing this wrong.
You're doing it wrong.
Thought so. That's just one I had for generating the ID.
Okay, yep. So first thing we need to do if we're going to generate a GUID is, now keep in mind we need to keep this GUID unique. So I want you to think about, I want the GUID that's getting put in the return object to be an actual variable that it's accepting, because we need to put that GUID in the database. So does that make sense?
So say it all again.
Okay, so we need to put the GUID in the database.
Yep.
But we also need to include it in the return object. How would you do that?
Well, you'd have to create a separate object called GUID.
Go ahead and do it.
Again, help fucking spell.
Let's quickly check my phone, see if anyone's trying to get a hold of me.
That if I put in that, you'd get an eternal loop, wouldn't you?
No, you wouldn't. Oh man, my leg's so bruised. I played volleyball last night. I don't know how I bruised it. So we need to create a GUID variable. So I think that's the first thing we need to focus on. So I'll get you to go back up to the line 5. And I'm going to get you to create a GUID variable. So remember, how do we create a variable? I want you to create the variable first before we do anything else. How do we create a variable?
Oh. Well.
Yep. And we're going to, what are we going to call it? Yep. And then we're going to do the, yep. Keep going.
Again, this is something I pulled from last time. Camel curse.
Yeah, that's fine. I think there was anything else needed to be added there. The reason why we need to remember, the reason why we need to put it as a variable is because if we don't put it as a variable and we put it in the return object and then we actually go right in the database, there'll be 2 separate GUIDs.
Yeah.
We need the same so that when they query back, we can actually query something with. So in this instance, we've got a return object, and we need to return a status. So inside of that, I'll get you to return a status. And what do you think the status should be? Because realistically,
it should be a string, right?
Sorry?
It should be a string.
No, I'm talking. Yeah, it'll be a type of string, but I'm kind of like what status. So in terms of if we've just created an item.
Yeah.
And we've stuck it and we're wanting to execute it, but obviously it hasn't been executed. We need to let the user know that there's something going on. Like they need to understand what's happening, because nothing pisses a person off more than going, is it, is my photo uploading? Is it not uploading? These are the kinds of things. So, in terms of this context, what status do you think we should have in terms of, the entire life cycle? So you've put your command up there. You've executed it, you returned it. Like, what do you think you should do? Like,
well, you can either have a progress bar.
Oh no. So think from a programmatic point of view. This is the result that the person's going to get here. It's going to be a single word. That's it.
Complete.
Okay, so that's one of them. What else?
If it's fail, or failure.
Okay. Yep. You probably want to write these down because these are going to be your architecture. Like, this is what you're going to adhere to. Like, I'm not gonna provide any input on this. This is what you're going to adhere to. So when you're returning the status, use the object to be the same. Call the object status. Don't call it completed, because it's easier to test on you knowing that that status property exists than it is to actually go the other way. Yeah, you're there.
I'm sorry, you've lost me when you said go the other way.
Okay, so if you went the other way, what I mean by that is if you went like completed equals true, well, you'd have to test for the completed on the client side. So if I was sending a command, it just makes my script even more complicated. But if I know the status property in the return object is like, and then there's a value after that, I don't actually have to do anything. I just return it and then that's it. So it makes more sense to go down that path than it is to go down
each individual error. To read.
Yeah. So it's just easier to read. Yeah. So let's so go status equals and then put what your statuses are. What status you think the initial request should be. Because remember, this is initial. This is not.
Yeah. I need to say,
Remember, open and close your string. It's a string.
Yeah. If this is the initial, then I'd do it that way.
Okay, it's your call. Like, I'm not going to provide any input on this. All right, I'm going to make like, because at the end of the day, though, if you think like what I want you to like, you're going to have to learn is that when you make the calls and there's something not right, and you might say, hey, okay, you know, let's say I'm not happy with a GUID and I want, you know, something else. You're going to have to go back and fix it up and then programmatically remember in your mind how to bring that all across. So it's really important to understand. That's why I'm kind of like, I'm going to be totally hands off on this part of the architecture, because I want you to understand that basically these statuses, they need to be meaningful and relevant, because at the end of the day, that when you're using it, you're going to need to understand what's going on. Is that charging?
If the light's not up, no.
It's probably plugged in. Yeah, it's on now. Weird.
More technical difficulties.
So what we're going to do now is I want you, like, every time you write code, you always, like, I always try and write comments with it. So on line 7, I'll just get you started. So line 7, this is going to be my return object. So I'm just going to write in there something like, this is a return object. This is basically what's going to be returned to the sender, something along those lines. Basically trying to make it as descriptive and informative for the person trying to debug it. Okay, so once you've done that, I want you to up on, let's just jump back up to line number 1, right up the top. I want you to write out all the different statuses you think you're going to be using, and you're going to adhere to each of them. And I want, like, this is going to be a tough one. And remember, write it as a formative comment. These are the statuses that we'll be using. So the first one's in progress.
Yeah.
Once you've wrote in progress, write a description of exactly what that means, so that once we're understanding it, we know what we're doing. Okay, sweet. All right. So the final thing we're gonna do is we're gonna need to return back the object.
Yep.
So let's go back to 25, and we're gonna basically use the return statement. Return statement basically means if it's inside a script block or function or any sort of PowerShell script, if you basically are returning something, you're returning an object or a string or something, whatever, back to the parent as a back to the parent so it can do things. Okay, so I want you to return using the return object. You haven't used it before, so it's return space object. That's basically a quick, dirty one.
Okay.
So, yeah, you don't know. Oh, so yeah, so return space object. Being return object. Yep. Okay. Now, I want you to think about what it's going to return. All right. So this is over the internet. Do you think it's going to work if we just return that?
Well, no.
Why not?
Well, all we're going to get in reply is the status saying in progress.
Yeah, we're going to need to write an element. We're going to need to write a row into the database. So that's something we're going to need to add later. I'll add the SQL query to do that. But for this specific purpose, the return object, if we were to return that over the internet, do you think that would work? Okay, I'm going to tell you now it's not. The reason why it's not going to work is because it's going to return a PowerShell object type.
Yeah.
Now that's bad because remember, if we kind of think of it from an architecture point of view, where that pipe that's going back, so when we sent our data, we're going to get a little response back saying, hey, I'm in progress. That data that has to be sent back, that basically needs to be serialized. So when we're serializing something, we're basically converting it from a PowerShell or from a programmatical object into a string.
Yeah.
In this sense, we would need to convert it to something. What do you reckon we should convert it to?
XML.
Yeah, we can convert it to XML. It's your project, so I'm just gonna let it roll. And then there's one extra thing that I personally do. Actually, we're gonna do it. There's one thing that basically I will do to that return statement to ensure that that works. What do you reckon? What do you think you would do to that to make sure it would ensure that it would work? Because remember, you got spaces all over the place. Now, return statement doesn't like spaces. So what do you think you would do?
Oh, you need to tell it to ignore the white space.
Nope. So what I mean by that is, I mean spaces in the code. So you've got return on line 27 space, return object space,
pipe space convert to XML.
But we want to basically just return, like we want that return object and convert to XML just to run, and then it goes to return. So what do you reckon you would do?
I have no idea.
Okay, remember how we were talking about the BOMDAS brackets? We're going to encapsulate it in parentheses. We want that part to execute first. So we want return. So if we wrap it return object and convert to XML inside of parentheses. Yep, and do the other side. That ensures return object will pipe to XML before
it gets returned.
Gets the return. So if we were to run line 16 to 27, we'll get some XML. Christian's made the call for XML, so I'm just gonna let it sit. I'm gonna quickly add some SQL to this now. So, what we're gonna do, is we need to basically create a, and I want to get you to comment this out, up as well. So, in your own time, you can actually comment this, so it can be a joint project. So we don't have to work on camera on this part. So what I'm going to do is we need to create an entry in the database.
Yep.
So what we're going to assume is our table structure, which was ID PowerShell status computer name. Oh, we do need a body. Oh, Michael, you made a really terrible mistake. We do need a body. Because how do we know what we're sending? We haven't like we're just basically... Oh, we do have a body. Oh, fantastic. Okay. There's a slight change we need to make. I've just had a bit of a brain fart, but this is the reason why. Yeah, we have these things. So, I'll get to that in a second. First thing I'm going to do is just going to write some quick code here. Like so.
Do you want me to just remove most of line 1?
No, I want all that there.
Okay, cool.
I need to know it's a post, because that's really important. So, actually, we're staying with XML. All XML. We're going everywhere XML because we're either one or the other. We're not gonna.
Yeah, well, I mean, you did say it was easier to read, and I'm hoping for readability.
Okay. I'm just gonna quickly just jump in here for a sec. So with REST API endpoints,
Yep.
Use JSON. When we're serializing code, it's better to use XML. Now the reason why we use JSON for the endpoint for being easier to read is the fact is it's really simple. We're only sending simple data.
Yeah.
But because we're sending a really complicated script, it's better to wrap it inside of XML because it preserves better. It has there's less issues that could potentially take place that could go wrong with it. That's just my thing. We can change this later, like it doesn't thing, but I'm just gonna quickly just say convert from XML. I don't even think that works. No, there's no convert from XML. So there's our first problem. We're gonna need to use JSON.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna convert that to JSON. Always stay the same type when you're sending back and forth. So convert to JSON like so. Perfect. All right. So the reason I'm gonna so you see we get content, request raw, convert to JSON. So there's our body.
Yep.
Okay, looking good. All right. So remember how we had this piece of code that we had, which was test object property?
Yeah.
I'm going to steal that, like so. I also want you to think about this, okay? We're going to clean this up. I'm adding that in. What this basically does is it tests the object property on any objects. It's really handy to have. The reason why we're using this is we're going to validate. We need to validate the input. So the way we're going to do that. Christian, what's our input going to be? I need you to define me an input.
Any odd input?
Not sexual, of course, but...
It's sad to go there.
Oh, there's one guy there. It's like water cooling things. It's like tubes, fittings, and putting in, and lubricants, and I mean, in certain tubes, and it's too hard, and it's too soft, and it's too bendy, and oh my gosh, it just keeps on.
Okay.
I don't want you to write that in there. I want you to write it up top here. I want you to kind of have a bit of a think about what our what our, because we need to know what data we're sending and what data we're expecting back. So I'll get you started just to provide a bit more context. So this is our return object, okay?
Yep.
I can actually go ahead and run this. So I'm just going to quickly fire up IC. Just paste that in there, and if we go return object, see that, convert to JSON, like so. So what I'm going to do is I'll just copy that, like so. Get rid of that. Up the top here, I do this. That basically gives me a lot of information as trying to read the code. So now, here, because it's always request response, what do you think the JSON should be that we're going to send? So remember, it's just an object. So think about it as a hash object. Don't think about it as JSON yet. Think about it as a hash. What do we need to send to it? Now keep in mind, we've got the... so these are the things that we wanting to do. So we could target a computer. I think that should be one.
So computer name.
Computer name. I think that'll be one. I think the code itself should be one. That would probably be your second item. Maybe. I don't know. I don't think there's anything else. What do you think of anything else? Okay, I want you to write that in a hash object, and we're going to convert it to JSON. Because this is the thing that we need to test, is we need to validate that those items are proper. Like, if you get bad code, we want to know about it.
Yeah.
So, and we can fail that back to the user and saying, sort your life out, you've got bad code. So I'll get you to quickly do that because we're running a little bit over time now. So, so you can just jump back into, I'll quickly jump back in here. Where are you writing? You're writing up.
I'm all the way up on line 9.
Yep.
Okay. So that should be SNED. Love it.
Do you want me to copy that object down? I'll copy that object off for you.
Yeah, if that will help.
That paste. There it goes.
We're still gonna need the GUID in there, aren't we?
Nope.
No?
Nope. But at the end of the day, it's your call. I want you to make these decisions. Don't worry about that because we're just going to convert it to JSON.
Oh, yeah.
So this is just spitballing right now. So even computer name, you can just write test01, anything like that. We're just spitballing. We're not like...
Okay.
Yeah.
And then code equals...
Just put random, like just put, don't put write PowerShell because it'll be base 64 encoded CLI XML. So what you could probably do is just write that in there. So as a string, I'll just write base 64 encoded CLI XML. Okay, cool. Now you know your structure. You can scroll back down and we can validate the input. So can you, I'll get you to go down to test object property. Keep going right down, right down, right down. Oh, I'm not scrolling down either. Keep going down to line 84. So what are the properties that we need to test for? If we're validating the input.
You've called it request body there.
That's the object.
Yeah.
What's the properties?
The properties were and then
Now, if you remember, so the way that it accepts it is as an array. So if you want to, you can just put a comma at the end of computer name, and then put your second property. Yep, perfect. So that's our first thing, and now we're going to write. We're going to finish this line. So I'll get you to put curly braces in this if statement. At the end of the if statement, sorry. And we're going to basically expand this out a bit. So, what do you think's happening here?
oh well, you need to say, well, if that returns true,
What do you think should happen?
well then should go to the next item.
Sorry? There's a bug in this code. Well, actually, it depends on how you write your code, though. So I want you to think about. So if the object exists, it'll return true. If the object doesn't,
it'll return
false. It's a Boolean value. So PowerShell natively inherits true.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Like where your cursor is right now, what do you think the code's doing at that point?
It's asking, is it?
What's the result of it?
If true, then do this. Execute this.
So, what do you think the result of that would be if they sent a incorrect result? Oh,
it would throw an error. It would just not work. Because if you set it runs native for true, you'll get an error when you get a false value.
No, so when I mean natively inherent for true, okay, don't worry about that. This is a Boolean, it's going to return true or false. So if it's natively inherent for true, it means that if the if statement evaluates to be true, it'll execute as true. It'll execute the code because it's true.
Yeah.
So what do you think is going to happen there if I don't put the property, I put codes instead of code?
It's not going to find it.
No, it's not. It's going to break, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This is where I kind of want you to start thinking about writing the logic. This is really where we're putting the logic. Rubber meets the road, thinking about these bit ins and outs. So how we're going, because ultimately what I'm wanting to do in this instance, it's ultimately your script. The way I would write this is that if there's a problem, which there is here, I want to test for a problem. So I want my script to, in this instance, if there's a problem, I want it to send back an issue, else just do what it needs to do. So in that if statement, we want to change that if statement so PowerShell natively inherits to false. So what are we going to do there? There's two ways you can do it, but either way's fine.
Can you put a not in there?
A not would reverse it. Yep. 100%. Just put a yep, and then yep.
Yeah.
Put a hyphen and then basically wrap it inside of parentheses, because remember, you want the not to execute after the evaluation to be true. What's wrong with that?
Got rid of a curly brace.
Okay, sweet. Yep.
No, back where it was?
Nope. You gotta get rid of that curly brace because you double curly brace, and yeah, you need to add a parenthesis. Yep. Okay, let's have a look at that now. So, yep.
It's doubled again. Difficult thing.
Cool. So now that's going to inherently evaluate to be false.
Yep.
First thing after that, what I would do, I'd basically write this is inherently evaluating to be false, and I would say the property, they've sent me dodgy code or something along those lines. So basically, the person who's evaluating the code, reviewing the code, knows that this is your true intention to writing PowerShell. Okay. So once we've done that, basically we need to return something. So what do you reckon we should return?
Um,
What we do, I'm gonna hold you up right there. That's going to be your homework. I'm going to get you to
yep.
clean this script up so you can continue to work on this. I'm going to add you as a contributor to GitHub right now. I'm going to call it there for today so that we're running a little bit over time, so I don't particularly want to last too long, but what's your GitHub thing? Let's get you to add that. Yep, perfect. So it's going to add you as a collaborator. You'll get a invite. I'll just send you the invite link as well. Actually, I'm going to quickly shut that door for a second. Okay, I'll just chat to you that on Discord. But yeah, let's leave it there for today. I think we've done a lot. It might not seem like that, but I really think obviously we've kind of gone through the architecture side of things, trying to understand exactly what we're wanting to achieve. So as you can see, we've got this full architecture drawn out, very quite basic, but it helps in terms of being able to understand exactly what we're wanting to achieve. So can I save this?
I think it should come up. Export image.
So I'm just going to export this as an image. I'm just going to chuck this on the BrizPug GitHub. And there's a profile. That's create a test directory as well. All right, and once we've done that, yeah, we'll just leave it there, and you can basically go through and clean that up, and that should be pretty much it. Thanks guys for joining. If you liked it, or if you want to have any feedback, just leave a comment in the suggestion box. And
yeah, once again, thank you for putting up with me. I know it is really dull watching someone try to learn.
Well, the thing is that it's making a solid active effort. That's the biggest thing. So anyway, guys, thanks for joining us, and we'll hope to see you next time. And bye for now.